Hello, I'm Peter Sheppard Skaerved, and this is the first of Opening the Composer's Workshop. Today, as often happens, a new piece arrived by the composer Sadie Harrison. Sadie and I have worked together for 30 years, and I thought it would be interesting if I took the opportunity of working through how I prepare the first entry into a piece like this. This is not how I practice for performance, but how do I find myself in from the beginning? The piece is based on a painting of mine, and here's the painting. And this is what Sadie sent me over Facebook, the painting and the piece above it. Sadie has an acute sense of the visual, and so I've got a lot to think about. And to be honest, my first reaction was not to play the violin at all. My first reaction was to look outside and then take my sketchbook and go and sit by the river, which is 2 minutes walk from where I'm sitting here, and just think about this, think how I was going to do it whilst looking at the sun on the water. So what I'm going to do now is a little bit nerdy, I'm sorry to say. I'm going to just take you through how I work into a piece like this. Now, the first thing to say is, with a new piece of music, absolutely the first thing I never do is play it through. The first thing I would do is to work out how its colours work on the most basic level. Now, on the violin, that's going to be open strings. So the first thing is I'm going to do a kind of very shallow analysis of how this piece, and I know with Sadie's music she very much understands, has a deep sympathy for how the violin and viola ring. She's taught me a huge amount about it, so how the instrument rings is not as it's the first thing I think about with her, but it's one of the first things that it's the easiest way towards singing, if you like. So I've got a blue pencil here, it's blue pencil for open strings, and I was going to go through, before I play a note, I'm marking in what appear to be, at first sight, all the ringing open strings. So this is pretty fast. It's because it's only a short piece, which means it's useful for an exercise like this. As I do this, it's obvious to me that there is two kinds of ringing open strings. Well, there always are two kinds of ringing open strings. There are strings which are allowed to ring after the following note has been played, and there are strings which can't ring because the following note cancels them. So if I do this string, if I play this open D, I play the C next to it, the D is still ringing. But if I play an E flat after the D, it stops the string ringing. Now that might sound not much of interest, but it is a crucial thing to fiddle with. So I don't necessarily notate those, that's going to be something we observe. So if just what I just wrote in was the fact, if I do a kind of pencil sketch of the harmonic material of the piece, we have a... then some harmonics. So that's nothing, no music at all. That's the kind of highlighting open strings. The next thing which emerged from that, of course, was the next set of ringing things on the violin, which is harmonics. And there's always a kind of aesthetic, ethical question for string players. Do you use harmonics or not? William Primrose, in his guide to the viola as part of the menu of music guides, talked about how the viola was always played with more open strings and harmonics than the violin. And when I read that one, I was very young. I thought, well, why? Why can't I do that? And I tend, particularly in music like Sadie's, which glints and shimmers a little bit like this light on the water today. My instinct is in something like this, as the piece is called, The River Dreams of Winter, although it's clearly set at in the middle of the night. It's the subtitle is Slackwater Midnight Mist, and there's a performance direction, a gentle ebb and flow, a slight line. I need to check what that says. Can't quite read that. So harmonic wise, the possibilities would be I could play coming up. She's marked one here. That D. Nothing yet. Then the next set written harmonics. In fact, we have two written harmonics and an open A, which have been notated the same way, which is interesting because, of course, that means she's told us that it's in the same territory. Then out the last run, there are none. There's a kind of, when I talked about ethics, the question is, if you're going to do a harmonic, does it actually take away from the line? And the middle of the piece where we had is, which I initially played, which is the easy fingering, if you like. Now I'm thinking, well, actually, and now I'm reading it, it says non-harmonic. I should have actually read what it said. So we have so the harmonics, she's just given me a fairly direct note, just for actually reading what she's written, that the harmonics should really, most of the time, only happen where they've been notated, and I'm not sure about that one in the first line. Now we get to the next stage of the way I work, which is how you set the hand. I'm not, at the moment, I'm not talking about the right hand at all, but I will in a second. So this is to do with how the left hand moves as little as possible. So the first phrase is in first position. Now we have an interesting question here, which is there's a held G. Now that's been marked as a crotchet, I think. So that means I can stay in first position. But what I will want to do is, in order to set this D major, I put my first finger, which you might not be able to see there, on two strings on the. So we set that, which means that the finger, and I use a red marker for that. That's my first covered fifth. Another one coming up. So that first finger is going to come down from the E string to the D and A string, laterally guides the hand across the fingerboard. However, the next time we get an F sharp, I need to keep the open A ringing, which also tells me that this needs to be played all on the D string. So that needs to be notated straight away with the Latin 3 symbol on these figures, which I'll use a harmonic there because that means I can travel. That's not been notated, but that's one where I don't have any problem doing it, and that rings, and there's no covered fifth. Now we're going to need a fifth here, so I need to set that in advance. And I put the fifth on the two strings before we get to it. There's nothing worse than a violinist or viola player or jumping at the last possible moment to a hand position which they could have been at anyway. So now this, another one. There's a B flat coming up, which is being held all the way to the end of the line. So I'm notating to hold on to these two things right until it goes on line 2. You can follow this if you've got the score. So, or at which point we release the left hand, and getting ready for the rise to the top E, I want to follow that line from the G, so not an open string, I'll go up the G string and my first finger goes onto the D, G and D on the third and second strings, the D string and the A string. And harmonically that's pretty sound because I'm playing, so I'll talk about extensions in a minute. Now we're going to, it's coming down, we need to get ready to play. So we do what might be seen as a bad shift and cover that B flat fifth, B flat major fifth in the middle of the second line by coming down into first position. That fifth is now marked on. There's another fifth coming here after that D harmonic. So mark the harmonic, and so now the question here, would you use first position, or third position, or second, or because we've got to get there. My instinct is, because this passage is expressive, to use third. There's a B flat major fifth there. Back to the C and G. Now here's an interesting, so we then have, so that I bowed backwards from this down bow, which that gives us from the up tempo. And you can hear that's basically exactly the same figure as the one I just played rhythmically and shape-wise. Then etc. So that's the kind of the center of the piece, and then we work out how the rest of it works. And I've been a little bit nervous about finding the shape for the opening, and this is where the direction coming from Sadie is going to help a bit. Gentle ebb and flow. So if I bow backwards from that central figure, so here's the, before we get to, this is the beginning of the second line, we have, now my instinct is a ritardando on that, so the question is whether or not it's going to be one bow again. We'll try it with one bow. It's very common for bowings to change, and one of the reasons for doing things in great detail is it actually gives you the option to play around with them, to change them, not to be stuck with them, not to say this is the only way it can be. My feeling is this should be on the down bow. So let's try bowing it from the beginning, just see what happens. As I thought, it seems that the beginning of the second line will need a gentle down bow tucked in. So let's try that bowing, which gives us our gentle ebb and flow. Let me have a look at the digital file to see if I can read what it says. It says a gentle ebb and flow, a single line, which is the whole way through the piece. At this point, I do have to start using the material, the imaginative material which Sadie has given me, before I impose too much of myself on it. So we go from the overall direction, gentle ebb and flow, single line within crotchet 48. So the tempo marking is between crotchet 48 to 52. Well, 60 is about that. So, but I'm going to start it a little bit on the slow side, I think. So I'm going to try it and just feel my way through it. Now I have some of the material I need to play it. And tell you what, let's make this a proper recording now. So let's make a new file and turn on the actual mic. Now at this point, it says simply the melancholy of waking alone at midnight. Sadie knows that I do a lot of my practice, unlike now, in the middle of the night. So this is, and she's written pieces about this. So let's go back into that again. The super forte. Now this last gesture, I'm already worried about it, because one thing I've learned from Sadie, she loves these kind of gestures. So so let's try. So we have this gesture, which I have to spin together with. It's not easy. Sadie's music is wonderful because it is hard, and this will not be as good as she wants at all today. Today is just a first read, although that's not right notes. The tough thing is getting back from the G sharp back to the F natural. So I'm now going to actually put some basic fingerings into this. That simply follows what we've established with the placing of fifths and harmonics. Second phrase. The augmented fourth. 3 to 4 was probably the thing I had most difficulty with when I was a child. It seemed almost impossible to do, and Bach is full of it, with chords like, it seemed absolutely impossible, but funny how the hand finds it. So, augmented fourth in first position. Second phrase, all fine. No, we haven't had any expressive shifts yet, and deciding when those are going to happen is important in this. So in this second phrase, how do I match the first phrase? So I think what I'm going to do is a kind of not an open fingering. Allow the unison A to take care of itself in the middle there, rather than necessarily playing it too aggressively. It's the kind of thing which Nathan Milstein loved doing. He loved the idea that if there was a harmonic or an open string, you could not play it, and the ear would hear it. Don't tell the composer. In concert, I might do this, which sounds like it's a bumpy fingering, but in a good acoustic, that can be very effective. So I'm going to put that in brackets as a possibility. Thinking ahead. So the question is, where do I go to the third position for this fifth? One thing to start having in mind now is how we voice lead through this in order to cover a shift where I don't want to hear it audible. And here it's a simple question of using the open string. I release it. and then going on. I think I'll keep that in the higher zone. This is something which Viotti taught, which was that not only do we move expressively around one string, the areas of the violin which work in similar ways. Say this sort of puddle here is one expressive area on two, even three strings, and come down there, setting up the cover of fifth. Now, in order to hide the bow change over the double bar, I will change the down bow when the E flat arrives. Now, voice leading here, two options. Either I continue the idea of the open fingering, which I don't think is going to work, or I go straight on the G string. That's not what she's written. She's written diminuendo, so try that. Now, you may notice straight away there is a problem there, which is in delicate music like this, as I lift off the A string, it plucks the A string. Now, that may sound, if I was a guitarist, you wouldn't be surprised. That may sound very neurotic, but particularly when you're recording, that's something which my engineer is always notating. So when you're working in fingerings in detail, you want to ask yourself the question whether or not the resultant noise of fingers leaving the string, which make these kind of noise, is something you want or you don't want. And here it's something I might want to avoid. So I'll hold the finger down a bit longer and not move it until as late as possible and gently. So I'm going to put a little extender on that D to hold it through, to avoid that click. Our first really expressive shift, which Sadie doesn't always like, but this is a place for it. Won't do it that much, she wouldn't like that. So coming down to the second finger, which gives us another cover of fifth. It's very interesting when you do a descending line like this to unison. What string would you go first, to the open string first, and then into the unison, or do you go to the lower note first? I would go to the lower note first, in which case that's going to be written in. Red pen, and a forefinger. Just gives me that bit more control. It's a bit more voice leading. And I notice that I hadn't written that in that open string. You're always going to find things you lost or missed. So 1, 2. Now to get along this passage, that move backwards and forwards to third to second position. I'll voice lead to the top line, and it's the finger replacement which gives it its colour. 2 to 3. To this chord, use the open string to take you across, and that gets marked in. I won't have time now to mark all of these in. That will come when I do the real detail, which will be off camera. This is crude stuff. So going on to the 3 against 4, you need low position to make this work. One thing I've been talking about open strings is make sure they go on ringing, and I haven't. Both of these will still be ringing while I play. I do it very loud and quiet. So you need to make, of course that's not how I play the dynamics, but actually those lower strings a teacher who I didn't get on with told me that, as a rule, in contrapuntal or chordal music, the lower part of the instrument should be played quietly, the top loud. I disagreed with him then. I couldn't disagree with him more now. This was absolutely wrong. Harmony doesn't come from top downwards. Sadie's music is not simple harmonically, but moments like this. Now, going on, we have one of those aesthetic questions. Has to change bow. So that means, although the crucial line. So going on with this bit of fingering here. Couldn't be simpler. No expressive fingering. All the moving around is covered with shifts, with open strings. Again, need to make sure that D is ringing out, especially because we have. So I need to allow this D to ring out because it's going to set up the class where, and really that is all the more pointed because this is still ring. So I judge this diminuendo which Sadie has written by listening a little bit to the decay of the note underneath. So that's literally the basics, if you like. And now I will just do a very, very crude read through of this. This is nowhere close to being even ready to be heard, but I wanted to just show you how in a fairly short bit of time you can get, and the piece is only, a minute and a half long. This is the amount of work you do in order to get it to absolutely stage one. This is the equivalent for the of a painter putting the primer on the canvas. Technically, bear in mind the composer's already done the work, so I'm not doing anything of any virtue here at all. So this is the first read through of Sadie Harrison's The River Dreams of Winter. One more observation after doing that, which is that I've immediately discovered a couple of bowings don't work in performance, and that there are places where I want to be freer with fingering. At this point I would step away from it and not allow that decision to happen yet, because what happens in performance or even a read through like that may not be something which I want to necessarily build into the hardwiring of learning the piece. That's just me in emergency procedures, a little bit doing this in public for the first time without any option of doing it twice.